As I start the talk, one of the cornerstones of SPY that we believe in are partnerships between researchers and nonprofits on the ground. And I want to thank Templeton for supporting this research. And I want to thank the state of Alaska and Pick, Click, Give and the Rasmussen Foundation for giving us the support and the access to run this experiment. I think this has been one of the cornerstones, and we hope that we can show this is the type of results and the type of information that we hope to generate with this initiative. This is joint work with John List and Jim Murphy, who's in the back of the room as well, who's at University of Alaska Anchorage. And the underlying motivation of this is saying what makes people give? And if we look at our economic models, there's two basic motives that we think about, okay? We have concerns for the benefits to self. So a warm glow idea, right? I want to feel good about giving. The other motive that we think about is that people care about the impact of their gifts. So I give because I want to help other people. This would be the purely altruistic version of it. What we want to do is we want to examine the extent, or what we're thinking about is uncovering which of those motives really underlies the donation decision. Now, past work that has tried to get at this question has taken an approach where they're saying, look, one of the big predictions of the pure altruism model is that others' gifts are a perfect substitute for my own. If my motive for giving, if why I want to see funding going into a nonprofit is because I care about what the end result of those dollars are, if somebody else gives, I'm perfectly happy with that. Under the warm glow model, if I'm getting benefits to myself from giving, others' gifts are not a perfect substitute for my own. So the trick that people have used in the past was saying, look, let's look at large gifts coming from the government or some large gift coming in, and then examining, does that crowd out giving by others? Now, a challenge with that, of course, is that the data that people use, it's aggregate. You also have to think about, well, are there changes in the intensity of the ask or how they're going about with fundraising, right, in response to these large gifts? So it's a very hard problem to look at with naturally occurring data and looking at these large gifts coming in. So we said, can we take a step back and think about an alternate approach to get at this question? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, yes, maybe we can. What if we can rely upon some of the evidence from social psychology? It's going to say we can use subtle frames to enhance motives. And in particular, we're going to look at targeted messages that are designed to enhance these different motives, okay? We're going to try to enhance self-interests by saying, give, warm your heart. Focus on you, warming your heart, right? This self-interest. To trigger altruism or benefits to others, we're going to give a message that's going to say, make Alaska better for everyone. So here we're focusing on the impacts for others besides yourself. And we're going to overlay this messaging campaign as part of a statewide program to promote charitable giving. A quick summary in case, as we're setting up for lunch and people start getting hungry and start tuning me out as we go on. Messages that highlight the benefits to others really have no discernible impact on giving. There's slight increases in dollars raised, average dollars raised, but it's not statistically significant, nor is it really economically meaningful. Messages that highlight the benefit to self have significant impacts to giving. People are 33% more likely to give, and average gifts are 50% higher. It also impacts the number of charities that they choose to support, and they share a larger fraction of this dividend that we're going to talk about in a second, that is the program that we run it through. All right, so why do we study charitable giving in Alaska, and how did we get involved in this project? So Alaskans consistently lag behind other states, and in fact, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 50th out of 50 in the country in just about every measure that you could look at for charitable giving. Now, there's lots of reasons why that's not particularly surprising. A lot of oil money, so nonprofits are getting a lot of support from oil companies in there. There's also been strong government support of nonprofits in it. And one that I think might be important is, there's a lot of transient jobs in there. People are coming in, so it may be harder to identify with local nonprofits. In response to this, in 2009, the state established this program called Pick, Click, Give as a way for residents to share a portion of their permanent fund dividend each year with eligible nonprofits in the state. So a little bit about the permanent fund. So what is this program that we're overlaying this giving opportunity in? The permanent fund is a sovereign wealth fund established in 1976 in Alaska. It's a depository for oil and natural gas revenues, and it's managed by a state-run, state-owned corporation. Each year, anyone who has lived in the state for the year or who was born in the state for that year is eligible for a rebate or a dividend payment based on a 5-year moving average of returns from that fund. So if you live in Alaska, whether you're a 1-year-old or 100, you are getting a return on this, okay? There's an application process starting January 1. You can register for your permanent fund dividend, and the registration period runs through the end of March. And the checks are distributed the first week in October. So now where we're going to come in, what Pick, Click, Give does, Pick, Click, Give is when you register, you have an opportunity to share some of this dividend with nonprofits. With our interest in this, we were approached by the state to help them design interventions to increase giving through Pick, Click, Give. Why? If you look at 2013, so the year before we get involved with it, the total value of disbursements through the permanent fund was over $500 million. Only 3.5% of eligible households shared or gave through Pick, Click, Give, shared some of their permanent fund dividend with eligible nonprofits. And it was less than 0.5% of all eligible funds. So it was about 2.6 million in 2013. Okay. If you look at statewide, what is this? It's a non-trivial portion statewide, though it's over 1% of annual giving through it. So you actually can move the needle here on it. What we set up is a natural field experiment that was part of the 2014 marketing campaign. Our subject pool is all 290,000 households in the state of Alaska. We sent targeted messages throughout the state during the last week of December, so we wanted to get it before, we wanted to get the messages out right before they can start registering, and we actually did it between Christmas and New Year's on it, so it was literally the week before. And we had to randomize at the zip level. We could not get address level data for it, so we were constrained. The finest level of identifiable information we could get was a recipient's zip. So we had to randomize at the zip level. So this was limiting in some sense in the number of treatments we could run, but it was fine. We still had more than enough power. Okay? Our design is we have 2 different postcards. The first one, again, is designed to trigger benefits to self, and the message on this is going to be warm your heart. The second is designed to trigger benefits to others, and here we're going to say make Alaska better for everyone. We had about 98,000 households per group, and there's a control group that does not receive any postcard. Here's what the Make Alaska Better for Everyone postcard looks like. So Love Alaska was the campaign theme for Pick, Click, Give in 2014. So at the top, it has the Love Alaska. Then we have the silhouette of the state of Alaska, and it says, Make Alaska Better for Everyone, share your PFD, pickclickgive.org. The Warm Your Heart, this is the front of it. It's a silhouette of a heart. It says, Warm Your Heart, share your PFD. The back was the same. It had the same basic information and would repeat that phrase and would have pictures of recipients throughout the state on it. The data that we got, we have pledges, all pledges that were made through Pick, Click, Give, and that includes the name of the charity that you chose to support. So every charity that you chose to support through this, you have the name of the charity and you have the dollars that they allocated to it. We also have some basic demographics. We know age, gender, we know what they report as their home zip and what the mailing zip was. And that's important because we sent out, the way that we had to randomize and how we sent out the messages, we were using their mailing zip, not necessarily their home zip. So there may be some people who did not receive, and so we can separate out those where the home and the mailing zip differ, and it doesn't impact our results on it. We also observe historic data, so we can control for those who have given in the past, so we can look at, do these messages impact different types of people differently? Okay. So let's look first at the likelihood of giving. And here what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a simple indicator. Did they give to any charity or not? And the most basic level, we're going to look at this and say, look, we've randomized which message you're receiving. Right? If we look at those who received the different messages and how they behaved in 2013, there was no difference across them. So you'd expect in 2014, if they hadn't received any message from us, they would behave in the same way across all these groups. So now we're going to look at it and say, does the receipt of a particular message impact the likelihood that the recipient of that message gives relative to those who did not receive any message from us? All right? Just focus on the first column on all this. This last number, 3.7, that's the likelihood, 3.7%, that somebody who did not receive a message from us decided to give, to pick, click, give in 2014. The top, self, that's an indicator for somebody who lived in a zip that received the postcard that said, warm your heart. And the way to think about that is somebody who received a postcard that said, warm your heart, was 1.2 percentage points more likely to give than somebody in the control. So on a base of about 3.7, you're getting 1.2, so this is about 33% increase in the likelihood of giving. Same results hold for controlling for the demographics that we have in the last column. These are the ones that we said, these are the people we don't know if they received a message or not. These are where the mailing and the home zip differ, and there's no impact of treatment on there, so we're okay. There's not something weird going on in the data. It really is that they're responding to this message, and that receipt of the message matters. Now let's look at average contributions. So here, again, what we're going to look at is we're going to say, let's look at those in the control group. How much did they give a recipient on average? How much of their permanent fund did they share with Pick, Click, Give? Right? And now compare how does that look relative to those who received one of our messages. So again, the way to think about this, just focus on the first column. The average gift from somebody in the control group was $4.08. Somebody who received the Warm Your Heart gave an additional $2.36. So it's over a 50% increase in average gifts that are coming through for those that are receiving it. Again, this is robust if you control for demographics. So yes, women provide slightly larger gifts. As you get older, up to some point, there's a inverted U relationship between age and how much is giving. But again, it's about a 50% increase in average dollars given for those that receive this Warm Your Heart. Other outcomes that we can look at, there are two other outcomes. Average donations amongst those who elect to give. So is this increase in average contributions simply coming through, we're bringing more people into the program? Or is it that we're bringing more people into the program, but also those who give make larger gifts? Okay? This is looking at that second question. Is it that those who are giving larger gifts on average? And we find, in fact, they are. So the average contribution conditioned on giving from somebody who received the Warm Your Heart was about $22 higher than those in the control group. We also can look at the number of charities that are supported. So there's about 470 eligible nonprofits that you can share your permanent fund with. So we can look at how many on average they were supporting. And it was about a tenth more that were going in. So 1 in 10 was supporting an additional charity, again, in the Warm Your Heart. No impact from the Make Alaska Better for Everyone. Right. Now we want to look at who is impacted by treatment. So some of my own prior work and prior work that's out there suggests that there may be a fundamental difference in behavior or motives across warmless households, or those who have been engaged and have given in the past, and coldless or prospect donors, lapsed or prospect donors, so those who have no history interacting. So here, since we observed past behavior, we're going to look at what was your decision in 2013. Did you give through Pick, Click, Give or not? And we're going to interact that now with treatment and saying, do the messages work differently on those who have not supported charities in the past through Pick, Click, Give from those who did give in 2013? Okay. And again, what do we find? So the thing to look at, this is the impact of receiving that for the lapsed or coldless donor, so somebody who had not given in 2013. Right? And the combined impact, this is the impact for somebody who donated in 2014 on it. So if you see, it's coming through both margins. It's actually working on past donors are more likely to remain committed to the cause if you give them this added message. But you're also bringing in new donors. So it's working on both types. Okay? Again, the others has no impact for either type of household. So focusing on the purely altruistic, trying to frame purely altruistic motives, has no impact on either type. See the same thing on the conditional pledge, total pledge. It's working on both types. Okay? This Warm Your Heart, so you're bringing in new donors and you're increasing loyalty and support from previous donors that are coming through. So some takeaway thoughts on this, how we think, putting this to practice. It appears that donors are more responsive to appeals that highlight benefits to self. So the self-interest motive for giving is really important, not so much this concern for others. How do we draw this conclusion? Well, if you look at the impact of our treatment, Warm Your Heart, they were 33% more likely to give. Average contributions were 50% greater, and they were supporting more charities. So any metric that you're interested in, you're seeing that it's having an impact on it. The impacts are much less pronounced for those who have given in the past, but they're still there. So it is working on both types. Okay? In contrast, messages that highlight the benefits to others have really no discernible impact on giving. If you think about it, there was no change, absolutely no change in the likelihood of giving. It was about as precisely estimated of a 0 impact as you can get. There is some small increase in average contributions. It was 10%, but that, again, wasn't statistically significant. Now, one thing that we are starting to look at, we're still digging into the data now, this is very much a work in progress, is saying, okay, this is looking at the average effects, what we've presented. Since we have the identity of the charities that they supported, we can look at, is there a shift in the type of organization that they're supporting? So if we're triggering purely altruistic motives through the Make Alaska Better for Everyone, do you see a shift in support to charities that focus more on Alaska causes, making Alaska better for everyone? Conversely, looking at what are the types of causes that are being supported by the people who are receiving the Warm Your Heart? And there's some preliminary anecdotal evidence just looking at changes in across groups, across the 3 treatments, and what were the top 15 charities that were supported from people in that group in 2013 versus the top 15 in 2014. There is a little bit of a shift in the Make Alaska Better for Everyone. There's slightly larger growth proportionally in Alaska-based social service, Make Alaska Better for Everyone type charities. Warm Your Heart, it's across the board, from puppies and animals to social service. It's not as clear on what's going on there, so it looks like it's just bringing in whatever your favorite cause is, but that the Make Alaska Better for Everyone is, some of this effect is it's just shifting who you're supporting. On the academic side, we think that this gives data that supports prior work showing limited evidence of crowding, and therefore inferring that really the motives for giving are warm glow or impure altruism rather than purely altruistic motives. And again, I would like to thank Templeton and Pick, Click, Give and Rasmussen for supporting this project, and look forward to working with them in the future.
Now we have plenty of time for questions for Mike or for both of us.
So I think this is really interesting research, and I'm particularly interested in the difference between your treatments, because they're not sort of, they differ on a number of different dimensions. One of those, right, is that Warm Your Heart is something I can experience immediately. Making Alaska Better for Everyone is something that's going to take a while. Do you have any sense of whether or not that might be the dimension that is moving the needle?
No, it's hard to disentangle, of course, and this is one of the things when you're going through, we would have loved to have had individual level data and had address data, because then we could have refined the messages further. Of course, you're absolutely right. If you're thinking about, Warm Your Heart, that is triggering, I feel that impact immediate. And it might be this immediate gratification or Make Alaska Better. And maybe that in part is underlying this difference between self-interest and benefits for others. Maybe this is capturing some sort of our belief, we want instant gratification, right? And so we focus on those motives that we receive the instant gratification. Yeah. We can't speak to that in this, and I'm unaware of any research that does, but I think that's, you're giving us a great ideas for moving forward on thinking how much of this is coming through purely the self-interest versus gratification time.
Right, I think this is one of the reasons that at least a lot of people have the intuition that if you bring people face to face with the people that they're giving money to, that increases the likelihood of donation, in part because of the immediate gratification of seeing their face light up, and so in other kinds of online or more removed donation experiences, to the extent that you can make the recipient's reaction more salient, you might get more concern for those others in that sense.
Yeah, and again, I think it's hard to think about disentangling those two, because you can also think, if I'm seeing that smile, that's going to make my heart feel better as well, right? Again, it could just be ramping up the self-interest and the motives. But I think that it is important to disentangle these two for thinking about how to organize campaigns. And,
Can I go on? So yeah, I had a very similar question. Essentially, it's not only instant gratification; it might be, level of impact. Maybe, I can't do much for all Alaska, but I can do something.
Yep.
For example, for someone in my own zip code, or close by. So that could be this. And yes, the smile can make you feel better, as an additional treatment. But you can also think of not putting the smile, just a little story, or some. I think. Jude Kessler has some interesting work on identity and charitable giving. So if you sort of somehow hint at local use of the money you donate and so on, you might have actually a greater impact than keeping it as broad as Alaska or something like that.
I think that there's two really good points on what you're raising in there, and there's another body of work that speaks to this that. There's some work coming out in social psychology with Paul Slovic and folks in his lab that have looked at not only, thinking about this idea, are you benefiting those that are close by to you, but how big of a problem is it that you're actually trying to address? So he looks at things where you'll manipulate whether, your donation will help save one shark or one of 10,000 sharks that are in danger, and that you crowd out giving as you make the scope of the problem bigger. And again, it's hard to sort of disentangle, is this just diminishing my glow, right? Part of it is, yes, I'm self-interest, but it's that I've convinced myself that I'm making a difference in people's lives. And so I want to believe that I'm truly making a difference. It's not that I want to make a difference, or I want to know that I'm making the difference. And so is it that it's crowding out that, or do we have more concern? Does altruism kick in on a smaller scale? And I think disentangling these, again, is an incredibly important direction to go with work. So it's nice to see, you guys are outlining the next 20 years of research for SPY and for us, basically. Right, Anya? This is perfect.
This is great.
Well, it's terrific to see the impact of the treatment, but I was also thinking from the perspective of the practitioner and how, with the exception of systematic philanthropies that look at impact and kind of rational giving, we often think that stories and emotional appeals are much more effective. So I was wondering, to the extent, and this would be relevant for replication or application of your findings, is could you perhaps recharacterize the problem as one of an emotional appeal and a rational appeal that has nothing to do necessarily with self and other?
Right. So actually, it's funny, we were talking right before this session with Jim and Heather and the folks from Alaska on it, so co-authors and our partners at Pick, Like, Give, on what is the next round. And I think we were in part inspired by Nick's talk this morning on thinking about, what if we look at how important is the appeal that it's coming through? And we know that people do use a lot of this, messaging from the recipient on it. And looking at, does it matter on if that's coming through vocal cues or if it is, but other variants, is it written text from them saying how important the gift is versus hearing their voice on it, making them more human? But other variations like you're suggesting with it on refining this, what is the best message to trigger self-interest? So I think I view this, and we view this research as really highlighting this importance of framing it through benefits to self, but what is the most important? And again, this gets back to the earlier response on it. Maybe part of this benefit to self is I want to feel like I'm making a difference. I want to see a difference, but I want to feel like I'm the one who's doing it. So then really highlighting from the beneficiary the impact that it's had may be stronger, and we would see even stronger results than what we have here. So again, I wish we could get address level data so that we could, if we had address level data, we could have done something like 90 variants on the message.
Mike, this is Melissa Brown. There's some old sociological research about individualism versus collectivism, and Alaska's really high on the individualism scale that was developed by Elazar and Vandello. And I'd be interested to see if you or anybody else can replicate this kind of work in a state that's really high on the collectivism scale, because I think your findings might be a little bit different if you're working with a population that's been scored by somebody as having a different set of collective values.
Yeah, and I think that if you have, we can look at and find states and try to replicate it on that and see how important. But I think it gets at a deeper question of this, and you're highlighting an important point. A lot of times we have this tendency that we present our research and we look at it as saying this is the motive, and we make it seem like it's a one-size-fits-all. But of course, there's various motives for people why they give, and there isn't this one-size-fits-all model. And I think that what the research is highlighting is the importance of understanding what the motives for your particular donor pool are, and designing campaigns that really attack that motive and highlight that motive. And so really personalizing it, and instead of saying, well, this has worked for others and we're going to take a one-size-fits-all approach to the question. But so the types of things that you're saying, I'm saying, look, if we think this is capturing something with individual versus collective behavior on it, do these impacts change if you go from one type of environment to another? Is important in understanding these motives.
Yeah, rather than adapting this, practitioners might be advised to run their own little tests for their donor pool.
The people who gave in 2013 and the people that gave in 2014, did they give the same amount and to the same organization? Because one of the pressures that we have is, particularly when you think about an annual fund, is retention.
Yep.
Because we find it after about 3 years that the donor goes on to another cause.
Yeah. So if we look at this, this is basically saying 64% of those who had given in the previous year in the control group, who gave in 2013, chose to give in 2014. So retention, you're getting about 64% retention in the control group. Okay? Those that prior givers that are then, in addition, receiving this Warm Your Heart are about 3.5 percentage points more likely. So it's a small impact relative to what the effect was if they hadn't received the message on it. But so there is some evidence that there is pretty good retention. I mean, if you're getting 64% or giving, we can track back even further and look at it. We have not looked at the data yet at the individual level to say, here's what I support, here are the causes that I supported in 2013, what are the causes that I'm supporting in 2014, and has treatment impacted the type of causes that I go? We can get to that, but this is literally, a lot of these results are hot off the presses, and Flo, who's one of my RAs, was sending me results last night for putting this together. But I think that's an important question. I'm looking at it and saying, thinking about this retention.
So one of the things that if you look at Professor Taylor's research about if you can get people to sign up for multi-year pledges, that they almost forget that money's not there anymore. So one of the ways that you enhance retention is five-year pledges.
Yep. In this, it's year to year, unfortunately, but we can go back and look. But I would say, this is 64% retention rates amongst the control group. That's pretty good. Relative to anything that we've looked at where we've gone back repeat, warm list people, the highest I can recall in any of the charities we've worked with in the past on repeat campaigns was something like 45%. So this is pretty good. There's something, so Heather, you're doing something right with keeping them.
There's one more question, and then we'll break for lunch.
Yeah, this is another N of 1, but it might be useful, which is that ActionAid, which is a international development agency based in the UK, ran an advertising campaign a few years ago, and the ads were explicitly about the warm glow. And I had never seen an advertising campaign that was so much about that. It featured a donor saying, I give because it's great for me and I feel da-da-da. And they had to pull it because there were so many complaints about it, which seems to me kind of interesting. And then particularly given your point about collectivism versus individualism, this was in Britain, which I don't know the data, but I would wager that it is a more collective, it comes out higher on collectivism than Alaska does, if you look at Sarah Palin's comments about our health system, for example, which we happen to really like. It just seems that these findings might be difficult to operationalize.
Unless you tested it in your own lab.
Yeah, well, maybe the ActionAid one was too overt, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think, again, I think that we view this as not a one-size-fits-all, every charity should go out and run this. But I think it highlights the importance of self-interest for certain donor types. Of course, understanding who are those, and I absolutely agree with this idea. It would be naive to think that a campaign that works in one environment for one charity should readily generalize to others. And that's part of why we started the Science of Philanthropy initiative, right? When you go out and talk, there's so much of this this tendency of people say, wow, this worked for cause X, so obviously it should work for me. And that's under the assumption that there is this universal model of behavior and that every donor. Yep. Agreed. Yep. And I don't think that there were any angry calls coming in about the warm your heart message, were there? But I think the general discussion of getting at this idea of when does one message, under what types of conditions, who are the people, what are characteristics that may be purely altruistic or concerns for others are a bigger motive for giving relative to the benefits itself is really important moving forward.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mike.